What would you do if your fiancé disappeared right after proposing to you in the romantic Seattle rain? Just vanished into thin air, leaving you with nothing but a wet engagement ring and 1,000 unanswered questions? I'm Alex, 25 years old, and 3 months ago, Jake Martinez did exactly that to me. He got down on one knee at our favorite coffee shop on Pine Street, promised me forever under the amber glow of those vintage Edison bulbs we'd admired for 2 years, and then ghosted me like I was some random Tinder match. But here's the thing about me. I don't just curl up and cry when someone tries to destroy me, just like when I handled that backstabbing coworker who stole my campaign ideas last spring. I fight back, I research, I plan, and I execute. Last week, I discovered Jake's engaged to someone else, a sweet little bank teller named Sarah who posts way too many gym selfies and apparently thinks she's found her prince charming. Poor girl has no idea she's dating a professional heartbreaker, so I decided to give her a wake-up call she'll never forget. This is the story of how I got my revenge, a journey that taught me more about myself than I ever wanted to know. Jake and I met during a particularly brutal Seattle winter 3 years ago. You know how it is here? The kind of rain that doesn't just fall, it settles into your bones and makes you crave warm spaces and warmer company. We found each other at Victrola on Capitol Hill, both nursing oversized lattes and pretending to work on our laptops while secretly people-watching. He was this charming finance guy with perfectly messy black hair and the kind of smile that made you forget about your trust issues. I was freelancing my way through the advertising world, living off cold brew and pure ambition. We bonded over our shared obsession with The Office reruns and our mutual hatred of pineapple on pizza, the foundation of any solid relationship, right? For 2 beautiful years, we were that couple, the one that made single people simultaneously happy for us and slightly nauseous. We had our Tuesday coffee dates at Victrola, Saturday hikes around Mount Rainier, and Sunday morning farmers market runs. We talked about getting a golden retriever named Waffles, finding a house in Queen Anne with a view of the Sound, maybe even opening our own creative agency together. Jake proposed to me on October 15th during one of those classic Seattle downpours that makes the whole city look like a scene from Sleepless in Seattle. He'd reserved our usual corner table at Victrola, the one by the window where we could watch the rain streak down the glass. When he got down on one knee right there between the mismatched vintage chairs and the local art hanging crooked on exposed brick walls, I thought my heart might actually burst from happiness. Alexandra Chen, he said, using my full name like he was making a formal declaration. Will you make me the luckiest guy in the Pacific Northwest? The ring was perfect. A simple solitaire that caught the warm light from those Edison bulbs we joked about stealing for our future home. I said yes, obviously. The other customers applauded. The barista gave us free scones. It was like something out of a rom-com, the kind of moment you replay in your head when you need to remember that magic is real. 3 days later, Jake stopped answering my texts. At first, I made excuses for him. Work was probably crazy. He'd just gotten promoted to senior analyst at his investment firm. Maybe his phone died. Maybe he was planning some elaborate surprise. I called his office, but his secretary said he was in meetings all day. I drove by his apartment in Belltown, but his car wasn't there. By day 5, I was camping out in front of his building like some unhinged stalker, which is exactly what his doorman called me when he threatened to call the police. That's when the truth hit me like a metro bus on Pike Street. Jake had vanished. Completely, intentionally, cruelly disappeared from my life, without a single word of explanation. I spent the next 3 weeks cycling through the 5 stages of grief like they were Netflix episodes I could binge in any order. Denial. Maybe he was in witness protection. Anger. I keyed every black sedan I saw that even remotely resembled his BMW. Bargaining. I lit candles at St. James Cathedral, even though I'm not Catholic. Depression. I ate nothing but top ramen and watched Bridget Jones' Diary 17 times. Acceptance. Well, I'm still working on that one. But then, exactly 1 year later, Instagram decided to rub salt in my still gaping wound. I was mindlessly scrolling through my feed, that soul-sucking habit we all pretend we're going to quit, when I saw it. A photo that made my blood turn to ice water in my veins. Jake, my Jake, looking annoyingly happy and tan, down on one knee again. But this time, he wasn't proposing to me. The woman in the photo was everything I'm not. Blonde, petite, with the kind of effortless beauty that made me want to throw my phone across my studio apartment. Her caption read, "When you know, you know. Can't wait to marry my best friend. #engaged, love wins, Seattle love, my forever." Her name was Sarah Mitchell. 26 years old, worked at Wells Fargo downtown, loved hot yoga and posting inspirational quotes over sunset photos. Based on her carefully curated feed, she was either the most positive person in the world or a complete fake. I was betting on option 2. But here's what really killed me. They'd been together for 8 months? 8 months? Which meant Jake had been seeing her for 4 months while he was still with me. While he was telling me he loved me, planning our future, picking out engagement rings, he was already building a new life with someone else. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. I doubled over on my couch, gasping for air that didn't seem to want to stay in my lungs. This wasn't just about being dumped. This was about being erased, replaced, forgotten, like I never mattered at all. But as I sat there in my pajamas at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, surrounded by empty takeout containers and the crushing weight of my own humiliation, something shifted inside me. The tears stopped falling, the shaking in my hands steadied, and for the first time in a year, I smiled. Because Sarah Mitchell had no idea what kind of man she was about to marry, but I was going to make sure she found out. I spent the next 2 weeks turning into someone I barely recognized, a digital detective with a minor in psychological warfare. My dining table became mission control, covered with printed Instagram photos, notes about Sarah's routine, and a timeline of Jake's lies that looked like something from a true crime podcast. Sarah's life was an open book, written in Valencia filters and hashtags. She posted everything: her morning Starbucks order, #vanilla latte life, her lunch spots downtown, #Seattle foodie, her evening yoga classes at Core Power, #namaste. She even tagged her exact locations, which was either incredibly trusting or incredibly naive. I was betting on the latter. Through her posts, I learned that she and Jake were planning a Christmas engagement party at her parents' house in Bellevue. She'd been posting about dress shopping, menu planning, and DIY decorations for weeks. This girl was living her Pinterest dream, and I was about to turn it into her worst nightmare. But I needed proof, solid, undeniable evidence that Jake was exactly who I knew him to be. So I did what any self-respecting millennial would do. I went full forensic accountant on his digital footprint. I created a fake Instagram account at SeattleArtLover23, complete with stolen photos of random coffee art and motivational quotes. It took me 3 days to build enough followers and posts to look legitimate. Then I started following Jake's friends, his coworkers, anyone in his orbit who might have photos from our relationship. Jackpot came from his college buddy Marcus, who apparently never met a Throwback Thursday he didn't like. There, buried in a post from 8 months ago, was a photo that made my hands shake with vindication. Jake and me at Pike Place Market, his arm around my waist, both of us laughing at something off camera. The timestamp showed it was taken just 2 weeks before he proposed to me. But the real evidence was in the comments. Sarah had liked the photo. She'd actually hearted a picture of Jake with his previous fiancé, which meant she either knew about me and didn't care, or Jake had fed her some elaborate lie about our relationship. I screenshotted everything. The photos, the timestamps, the comments, even Jake's old posts about our future together that he'd clearly forgotten to delete. I organized it all into a folder on my laptop, labeled Project Truth, because sometimes revenge requires a professional approach. My plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would reach out to Sarah privately, woman to woman, and show her exactly who she was marrying, not out of spite, well, maybe a little out of spite, but because she deserved to know the truth before she legally tied herself to a professional liar. I crafted the perfect message, rewriting it 17 times until it struck the right balance of concern and credibility. Hi, Sarah. I hope this doesn't come across as weird, but I felt like I had to reach out. I saw your engagement announcement, and while I want to be happy for you, I think there are some things about Jake you should know. I was in a relationship with him until very recently, and I have proof that we were together during the time he was supposedly single and falling for you. I'm not trying to cause drama. I just think you deserve the truth before you marry him. If you want to see the evidence, I'm happy to share it. I attached 3 of the most damning photos and hit send before I could lose my nerve. Then I waited. For 48 hours, nothing happened. Sarah didn't respond to my message, didn't even open it according to Instagram's read receipts. I started to second-guess everything. Maybe she thought I was some crazy ex trying to sabotage her happiness. Maybe Jake had already prepared her for this possibility, painted me as an unstable stalker who couldn't handle being dumped. I was spiraling into a full anxiety spiral when my phone buzzed with a notification that made my blood freeze. Jake was calling me. I stared at his name on my screen. Jake, heart emoji, with the heart emoji I'd never bothered to change, and felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. My finger hovered over the answer button, torn between hanging up immediately and answering just to hear what excuse he'd try to sell me. Curiosity won. Hello, Jake. I tried to sound calm, but my voice cracked on his name like I was 14 again. What the hell, Alex? His voice was harder than I remembered, stripped of the warmth that used to make me melt. I'm insane? The laugh that escaped me sounded foreign, bitter. I'm not the one who proposed to 2 different women in the same year. We broke up, he said. Like that explained everything. I moved on. You should try it sometime instead of stalking my fiancé on social media. We broke up? My voice pitched higher. Jake, you disappeared. You ghosted me 3 days after proposing. That's not breaking up. That's psychological terrorism. You're being dramatic. The casual dismissal in his voice, like my pain was an inconvenience he couldn't be bothered to acknowledge, ignited something volcanic in my chest. Dramatic? You want to see dramatic? Because I have screenshots, Jake, lots of them. Photos of us together while you were supposedly falling in love with Sarah. Texts where you told me you couldn't wait to marry me. Should I show her those too? The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Alex, he finally said, and his voice had shifted to something I'd never heard before. Cold, calculated, dangerous. If you contact Sarah again, if you try to ruin this for me, I will make your life very difficult. I know people. I can make sure you never work in advertising again in this city. The threat hit me like a slap. This wasn't the Jake who used to bring me soup when I was sick, who cried during Up and pretended he hadn't. This was a stranger wearing my ex-fiancé's voice. Are you threatening me? I whispered. I'm warning you. Stay away from Sarah. Stay away from me. Move on with your life before I help you do it." He hung up, leaving me standing in my apartment with my phone pressed to my ear and my hands shaking with rage. That's when I knew I wasn't just dealing with a cheater anymore. I was dealing with someone who thought he could intimidate me into silence, someone who believed his threats carried more weight than the truth. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. Jake's threat lit a fire in me that no amount of yoga breathing or therapeutic journaling could extinguish. He thought he could scare me into submission? He clearly didn't know me at all. I spent the next day researching Jake like he was a hostile takeover target. I dug through his LinkedIn connections, his company's website, even his parents' Facebook pages. I was looking for leverage, for something that would make him think twice about following through on his threats. That's when I found it, buried in a professional development post from 6 months ago. Jake had been awarded Junior Analyst of the Year at Pinnacle Investments. But according to the article, the award was given for a client presentation that I recognized immediately. It was my presentation, the marketing strategy I developed for a boutique hotel chain last year, the one Jake had helped me practice for my own client pitch. He'd taken my ideas, my research, my creative concepts, and presented them as his own work. The audacity was breathtaking. He hadn't just stolen my heart and my future, he'd literally stolen my intellectual property and gotten promoted for it. But more importantly, it was proof of a pattern. Jake wasn't just a cheater, he was a thief, a liar, and a fraud. And I was going to make sure everyone knew it. I called Sarah. She answered on the second ring, her voice cautious. "Hello? Sarah? This is Alex. I know Jake told you not to talk to me, but I need you to hear me out. I have more than just photos of us together. I have proof that Jake stole proprietary work from me and used it to get promoted at his job. This isn't about jealousy or wanting him back. This is about you marrying someone who has no problem lying, cheating, and stealing to get what he wants." Her voice was smaller than I expected. "Jake said you were obsessed with him, that you couldn't accept that he'd moved on. Sarah, I'm going to send you everything I have. Photos, texts, screenshots of my original work that he stole. Look at it all, and then ask yourself if this is the kind of man you want to spend your life with." I could hear her crying softly on the other end of the line. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Because a year ago, I was you. I was planning my future with a man I thought I knew, and he destroyed me without a second thought. I'm not trying to get him back, Sarah. I'm trying to save you from making the same mistake I did." The line went quiet, except for her sniffling. "Send me everything," she said finally. Jake's threat lit a fire in me that no amount of yoga breathing or therapeutic journaling could extinguish. He thought he could scare me into submission? He clearly didn't know me at all. I spent the next day researching Jake like he was a hostile takeover target. I dug through his LinkedIn connections, his company's website, even his parents' Facebook pages. I was looking for leverage, for something that would make him think twice about following through on his threats. That's when I found it. Buried in a professional development post from 6 months ago, Jake had been awarded Junior Analyst of the Year at Pinnacle Investments. But according to the article, the award was given for a client presentation that I recognized immediately. It was my presentation, the marketing strategy I developed for a boutique hotel chain last year, the one Jake had helped me practice for my own client pitch. He'd taken my ideas, my research, my creative concepts, and presented them as his own work. The audacity was breathtaking. He hadn't just stolen my heart and my future, he'd literally stolen my intellectual property and gotten promoted for it. But more importantly, it was proof of a pattern. Jake wasn't just a cheater. He was a thief, a liar, and a fraud. And I was going to make sure everyone knew it. I called Sarah. She answered on the second ring, her voice cautious. "Hello? Sarah, this is Alex. I know Jake told you not to talk to me, but I need you to hear me out. I have more than just photos of us together. I have proof that Jake stole proprietary work from me and used it to get promoted at his job. This isn't about jealousy or wanting him back. This is about you marrying someone who has no problem lying, cheating, and stealing to get what he wants." Her voice was smaller than I expected. "Jake said you were obsessed with him, that you couldn't accept that he'd moved on. Sarah, I'm going to send you everything I have. Photos, texts, screenshots of my original work that he stole. Look at it all, and then ask yourself if this is the kind of man you want to spend your life with." I could hear her crying softly on the other end of the line. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Because a year ago, I was you. I was planning my future with a man I thought I knew, and he destroyed me without a second thought. I'm not trying to get him back, Sarah. I'm trying to save you from making the same mistake I did." The line went quiet, except for her sniffling. "Send me everything," she said finally.
The confrontation happened at Victrola, because apparently I have a flair for the dramatic and a twisted sense of poetic justice. I'd suggested we all meet there, me, Sarah, and Jake, under the pretense of clearing the air and moving forward like adults. Sarah had agreed immediately. She was desperate for answers. Jake resisted until Sarah told him she was going with or without him. I arrived first, claiming our old corner table with the same confident energy I used to pitch campaigns to skeptical clients. I ordered 3 drinks, my usual oat milk latte, Sarah's vanilla latte, thanks Instagram, and Jake's pretentious cortado. The barista recognized me and asked where I'd been. "Working on a project," I told her, which wasn't technically a lie. Sarah walked in 10 minutes later, looking exactly like her photos, but smaller somehow, as if the weight of uncertainty had compressed her. She was pretty in that effortless way that probably made Jake feel like he'd won some kind of genetic lottery. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she wore a cream-colored sweater that screamed, "I'm an innocent bank teller who believes in true love." She approached me, tentatively, like I might bite. "That's me?" I stood and offered her a smile that I hoped looked reassuring rather than predatory. "Thank you for coming. I know this is weird." "Weird is one word for it." She sat down across from me, her movements careful and contained. "Where's Jake?" "Running late, apparently. Some things never change." The bitterness slipped out before I could stop it. We made awkward small talk for about 5 minutes. The weather, rainy, shocking. Her job, she actually seemed to love it. My work, I may have embellished my client roster slightly. She was nicer than I had expected, which made everything both easier and harder. Jake burst through the door like a man walking to his execution, scanning the coffee shop until his eyes found us. Even from across the room, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw was set. He looked older than I remembered, or maybe I was just seeing him clearly for the first time. He slid into the chair next to Sarah with the kind of territorial possessiveness that made me want to roll my eyes. "Ladies," he said, trying for casual and landing somewhere near hostile. "Jake," I replied evenly. "Thanks for joining us." "Let's get this over with." He reached for Sarah's hand, but she pulled away slightly. The small rejection made my heart sing. "Sarah asked to see the evidence," I said, pulling out my phone. "I thought it would be better if we all looked at it together." I started with the photos, Jake and I at Pike Place Market, at Gasworks Park, at a Seattle game wearing matching jerseys. Photos that were clearly couple photos, not friend photos. Photos that were time-stamped during the period when he was supposedly single and pining for Sarah. Jake interjected. These could be old, but his voice lacked conviction. Could be, I agreed, but these can't. I showed them the text screenshots, messages from Jake to me about how excited he was for our future together, how he couldn't wait to start house hunting, how he had already started planning our honeymoon to Italy. Messages that were sent just days before he proposed to me, weeks after he'd started dating Sarah. Sarah's face was getting paler with each screenshot. Jake, she whispered, you told me you'd been single for 6 months before we met. He was scrambling now, that smooth charm deserting him. Alex is taking these out of context. We had an on-again, off-again thing. It was complicated. Complicated? I laughed, and it wasn't a nice sound. Is that what we're calling a 2-year relationship that ended with a marriage proposal? You're being manipulative, Jake snapped. This is exactly why I had to end things with you. You're unstable. That's when Sarah found her voice. End things? Jake, she said you disappeared. Just stop talking to her after you proposed. Jake's face flushed red. I'm lying. Am I? I pulled up one more screenshot. Jake's Instagram post from the day after he proposed to me. A photo of a sunset with the caption, "Big changes coming, excited for the future with my girl." A post that Sarah had liked, even though she was supposedly his girl at the time. The silence stretched so long I could hear the espresso machine hissing behind the counter. I can explain, Jake started, but Sarah was already shaking her head. No, she said quietly. No, you can't. She pulled off her engagement ring, a ring that looked suspiciously similar to mine because apparently Jake had about as much imagination as he did integrity, and placed it on the table between us. Sarah, baby, please, don't, she said steadily now, stronger. Don't call me baby. Don't call me anything. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and looked directly at me. Thank you, she said, for being brave enough to tell me. Then she walked out, leaving Jake and me sitting across from each other in the wreckage of his lies. He stared at the ring on the table like it might spontaneously combust. When he finally looked up at me, his expression was pure venom. I hope you're proud of yourself, he snarled. Actually, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded, I really am. I stood up, dropped a 20 on the table to cover the drinks, and headed for the door. But I stopped and turned back because I couldn't resist one final twist of the knife. Oh, and Jake, you might want to start updating your resume. I sent HR at Pinnacle a very interesting comparison between my original hotel marketing presentation and your award-winning client pitch. Turns out intellectual property theft is a fireable offense. Who knew? His face went white as I walked away, leaving him sitting alone at our old table with an engagement ring that nobody wanted, and the slowly dawning realization that his house of lies was finally collapsing. I stepped out into the Seattle rain, tilted my face up to the sky, and smiled.
3 weeks later, I was back at Victrola. Not because I'm a masochist, but because I refused to let Jake's memory poison my favorite coffee shop. I was working on a new campaign for a sustainable fashion startup, and for the first time in over a year, I felt like myself again. And that's when Sarah walked in. I almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the perfectly polished bank teller from her Instagram photos, This Sarah had her blonde hair in a messy bun, wore ripped jeans and a vintage band t-shirt, and looked genuinely happy in a way that her carefully curated social media presence never had. She ordered her drink, a cold brew instead of her usual vanilla latte, and spotted me in the corner. For a moment, I thought she might leave. Instead, she walked over. "Mind if I sit?" she asked. I gestured to the empty chair. "How are you doing?" "Better than I expected, honestly." She settled in with her drink, and I noticed she wasn't wearing any makeup. She looked younger, more real. "I wanted to thank you again, and apologize." "For what?" "For not believing you immediately, for thinking you might be some crazy ex trying to ruin my happiness." She laughed, but it wasn't bitter. "Turns out you were trying to save my happiness." I studied her face, looking for signs of the devastation I'd expected to cause. Instead, I saw something that looked suspiciously like relief. "She found out some other things after our coffee shop meeting. Turns out Jake has quite a pattern. 3 other women in the past 5 years, all of whom he strung along until something better came along. One of them reached out to me after she saw our engagement announcement end." My stomach dropped. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I had no idea it was that extensive." "Don't be sorry. You did me the biggest favor of my life." She took a sip of her cold brew and smiled. "I also quit Wells Fargo." "What?" "I hated that job. Hated everything about corporate banking, the suffocating dress code, the way they treated customers like account numbers instead of people. But I thought I had to be practical, stable, the kind of woman a man like Jake would want to marry." She shrugged. "Turns out, I don't want to be that woman at all." "What are you doing now?" "I'm starting a nonprofit for women who've been financially abused in relationships, helping them rebuild their credit, establish bank accounts, get back on their feet. Turns out my banking background is actually useful for something I care about." I felt something shift in my chest, a loosening of tension I hadn't realized I was carrying. "That's amazing, Sarah. Really." "None of it would have happened if you hadn't been brave enough to tell me the truth." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "So, thank you for giving me my life back." After she left, I sat in that coffee shop for another 2 hours, staring out at the Seattle rain and processing everything that had happened. The revenge worked exactly as I'd planned. Jake lost his fiancée, his job, and probably his reputation in the tight-knit Seattle finance world. Sarah escaped a marriage that would have made her miserable, and I got my closure. But here's what I didn't expect. Revenge didn't feel the way I thought it would. Don't get me wrong, watching Jake's carefully constructed lies crumble was deeply satisfying. Knowing that he couldn't just disappear from people's lives without consequences felt like justice. But the real victory wasn't his downfall. It was watching Sarah transform from a woman trying to be someone else's perfect wife into someone who knew her own worth. It was realizing that I didn't need Jake to apologize for what he had done to me. I didn't need him to acknowledge my pain or validate my feelings. I'd already done that for myself. The truth is, revenge gave me back my power, but letting go gave me back my peace. Just like when I finally stopped obsessing over that backstabbing coworker from last spring and focused on building my own client base instead, moving forward turned out to be the ultimate victory. I still think Jake is a pathetic excuse for a human being. I still think he deserved everything he got. But I also think I deserved better than spending months of my life plotting his downfall. So I'm choosing to focus on building something instead of tearing something down. I'm expanding my freelance business, maybe even looking into opening that creative agency I used to dream about. I'm dating again, cautiously, but hopefully. And I'm learning to trust my instincts about people, because they tried to warn me about Jake from the beginning. The rain is still falling outside Victrola, the same way it was the night Jake proposed to me in this exact spot. But this time, I'm not waiting for someone else to make me feel complete. I'm complete all by myself. Though I have to admit, planning that revenge was pretty fun. And if someone else decides to cross me in the future, well, let's just say I've gotten pretty good at this whole strategic justice thing. But hopefully it won't come to that. Because the best revenge I've learned is living well. And for the first time in over a year, I'm really, truly living. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? How did you move past it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below.
All right, let's get real for a minute. If you're listening to this and thinking about your own revenge situation, here's what I learned that might actually help you. First, documentation is everything. I cannot stress this enough. If someone is lying to you, manipulating you, or straight up stealing from you, keep records. Screenshot those texts before they delete them, save those emails before they mysteriously disappear from your inbox, print out those social media posts because people love to revise history when it suits them. I kept everything from my relationship with Jake in a cloud folder that he couldn't access. Photos with timestamps, text conversations, even receipts from dates and gifts. At the time, I thought I was being sentimental. Turns out, I was being strategic. Second, social media is both your best friend and your worst enemy in these situations. Jake and Sarah made it incredibly easy for me to track their relationship timeline because they documented everything online. But remember, anything you post can and will be used against you in the court of public opinion. I created that fake account specifically so my real investigation couldn't be traced back to me. Third, and this is crucial, make sure your revenge serves a greater purpose than just making you feel better. The most satisfying part of my plan wasn't humiliating Jake, although that was pretty great. It was preventing Sarah from making a terrible mistake and helping her find her authentic self. Revenge that helps other people is revenge that lets you sleep at night. Fourth, know when to stop. I could have kept going after Jake lost his job. I could have reached out to his parents, his friends, his new potential romantic interests. But there's a difference between seeking justice and becoming obsessed. The goal is to reclaim your power, not to become the villain in someone else's story. And finally, the most important lesson I learned, revenge is a tool, not a destination. It gave me the closure I needed to move forward, but it wasn't the thing that actually healed me. That happened when I stopped defining myself by what Jake had done to me and started building the life I actually wanted. If you're dealing with your own betrayal situation, here are some practical tips that worked for me. Document everything in real time. Don't wait until you need evidence to start collecting it. Create a secure folder, cloud-based so it can't be deleted, and save screenshots, emails, texts, even voice recordings if your state allows single-party consent recording. Research thoroughly before you act. I spent weeks learning Jake and Sarah's routines, their social circles, their vulnerabilities. Knowledge is power, and the more you know, the more surgical your approach can be. Always have an exit strategy. Before I sent that first message to Sarah, I had already prepared for multiple scenarios. What if she didn't believe me? What if Jake found out immediately? What if they tried to turn it around on me? Think 3 moves ahead. Use their own tools against them. Jake loved social media and professional networking, so that's where I hit him. Sarah valued honesty and integrity, so I gave her the truth he'd been hiding. The most effective revenge uses someone's own values and habits as the weapon. But remember, and I cannot emphasize this enough, make sure you're seeking justice, not just inflicting pain. Ask yourself, will this make the world a little bit better or just make you feel temporarily powerful? The best revenge stories are the ones where everyone learns something valuable, even if it hurts. Most importantly, know yourself well enough to recognize when you're crossing the line from empowerment into obsession. I had friends checking in on me throughout this whole process, making sure I wasn't losing myself in the pursuit of Jake's downfall. Find people who will tell you the truth about your behavior, even when you don't want to hear it. The goal isn't to become someone who destroys others for sport. The goal is to become someone who stands up for themselves and protects other people from the same harm they experienced. There's a big difference between those two things, and it's a line worth respecting. Jake taught me what kind of person I don't want to be with, but planning his downfall taught me what kind of person I want to be in general. Someone who fights for truth, who protects the innocent, and who doesn't let bullies win just because confrontation is uncomfortable. That's a lesson worth learning, even if the tuition was a year of heartbreak and a very expensive engagement ring that I definitely should have returned. So that's my story, and that's my advice. Use it wisely, and remember, the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better. Until next time, this has been Alex, reminding you that every villain in your story is just a plot device to help you become the hero of your own life.